Welcome to another episode of the RVing Life Chats, bringing the best of RV and RVing gear shopping tips to you directly from the mouths of experienced, been there, done that RVers. Today's show is sponsored by RVingPlanet.com. And now, here's your host, Kevin Wallenbeck.
Today we have with us Alan Sills. He's a full-time traveler living in a fifth wheel since 2011. A science educator at heart, and now he's a traveler and a ski instructor and an RV consultant. He writes about the RV life, RV issues, and living an entrepreneurial lifestyle on RV Across America at RVacrossAmerica.net. So Alan, welcome to the show today. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on you, and I went out and looked at your website quite a bit. You have some wonderful content on there, and at the end of the show for everybody, we'll have in the show notes links to how to get a hold of Alan, and he'll mention how to do that as well. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. There's some great resources there, both in blog form from his travels and things. But we're going to let him just go ahead and get started and kind of tell us about your story. Just how did you get in? You said 2011 is when you started. Maybe there's a backstory to that. So just kind of give us your backstory, Alan, kind of what got you into RVing, why do you do it? And maybe you're kind of start to share your first experience a little bit about why, not why, but that process of going and buying your first RV, your first new RV. What was that like for you? So I'll let you take it away.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I have a lot of fun with the website, and I actually got my first motorhome at the time back in the mid 2000s, around 2003, 2004. And I was an educator. I was a classroom educator, science educator for about 20 plus years. And I learned that summertime was a great opportunity for professional development. And I learned that I could travel and, have a good time traveling while I was also learning something. And a lot of those opportunities were on the West Coast. I was on the East Coast. And I thought about how am I going to get out there? And instead of flying, I decided why not drive and really get a feel for the country. And that's when I bought my first two Class C motorhomes. They were small. One was a 21-foot, one was a 24-foot. They were used, but they were just barely used. One of the things I learned about the used market real early on is it's not like the car or truck market. Cars and trucks people, of course, have to have. And most people do not trade in or sell a car or a truck until there's a pretty good reason to be selling that car or truck. Whereas with an RV, lifestyle or choices change, and they seem to change rather quickly.
Sure.
So those two Class Cs that I got were virtually new. I used them for a year and a half, and bought them at the right price, sold them at the right price, and sold them as virtually new.
Wow.
Got back into it in 2011.
Okay.
I had left the classroom in 2006 to move to Florida from New Jersey.
Okay.
And I moved to Florida to care for my dad. He was from that generation. He was pushing 90 at the time.
Wow.
And I was faced with the decision where I either was going to have to, as I put it, warehouse him in a nursing home or take care of him in his own home and, for the remainder of his life until he went home to the Lord. And I opted for that latter plan, stayed with him until he passed in late 2011. And frankly, within 3 weeks, I had bought the fifth wheel and the truck, and I was out of Florida and on the road.
There you go.
Through that new purchase program back then.
Yeah. So as you had owned a couple motorhomes you mentioned, prior to your purchase in 2011, the RV. So many people watching this, some of them are repeat buyers, right? So there's lots of folks out there that obviously upgrade and looking for new RVs. Unfortunately, too many of them have bought their first one the wrong way, made some mistakes along the way, and how they made the choices of their lifestyle and things like that. But for that person that's looking to buy that new RV, a used RV, new RV, there's different reasons for both, and maybe a different show we could have you back on and have you talk more about buying used RVs. But in this case, the last one you bought was new. And then also, if I read that right on your blog, you're also looking to sell your current RV and upgrade to a new one. So you've been going through that process. So what are some things that, when you're looking to buy a new RV, that people really need to be mindful of and careful of so that they make good, solid choices for themselves?
I think the first thing that a buyer of an RV has to think about is what's your lifestyle going to be like? How are you going to use it? Are you going to be in it for 4 trips for 3 or 4 days each throughout the year? Or are you going to be in it full time or somewhere in between? There are more and more people, thanks to modern technology, that are opting for a full-time lifestyle, traveling on the road, and modern technology makes this possible. I mean, we're having this conversation right now using the internet. I'm using a camera at my end. I'm sitting at my dinette table and, perfectly comfortable in the middle of nowhere. And it works out real well. So when you think about what is it I want to get, there are a number of different types of motorhomes and towables.
Absolutely.
So you really have to start looking at what's going to be my need. If I have young kids, I would be thinking about a motorhome, because as you're traveling down the road, do you really want to stop at every bathroom between here and Kentucky? Or would you rather be able to use that motorhome and enjoy it while you're traveling with the kids, and the kids are going to be more comfortable. There's food on board, there's bathroom on board, and everybody can get around and kind of relax. On the other hand, for me, when I looked at that option, I opted for a towable. I had no problem with putting the kingpin in the back of my truck. I did the research to find out how much of a truck I needed, and I bought the right truck. I travel alone, so there's no issue as far as bathroom breaks and things like that. And with
Just
the
how
fifth
long
wheel,
you know, right?
yeah, exactly. With the fifth wheel, you can really get the kind of luxury and comfort for 1/5 to 1/10 the price of what a Class A motorhome is going to be. And when you need service on the vehicle that's towing it, you're not giving up your home. If you're in a Class A motorhome, you're giving up your home.
You're stuck.
So
At least,
to think
right.
about,
So,
yeah.
no, that's a good point. So we had a previous guest, one of our other shows, Mark, and he was with Campground Views, and he mentioned the same thing about the difference in price from a motorhome to a fifth wheel in terms of the same type of lifestyle or quality of a fifth wheel compared to the quality of a motorhome, and that it's just a huge price difference. So even with a motorhome, though, I mean, they're both house on wheels, but one has an engine and one doesn't, but you have to have the tow vehicle. So in your experience having a motorhome and a fifth wheel, do you find that the cost, even with the tow vehicle, is still, I don't want to say acceptable, but how do you find the cost comparison between the fifth wheel experience, having to have a nice truck to tow with, versus having the motorhome?
It's a great question. The way I look at it is this. If you have a motorhome, now when I had my Class Cs, again, it was just me, and I bought small. I bought a 21-foot and then later a 24-foot. So if I needed to go to the market, I drove to the market. Much the way people drive their car, I drove my motorhome. It fit into spots, or kind of sort of fit into spots. Close enough. And that was just fine. Now, if I was going to be, and at that time, I was the guy who was going to be in it for 8 weeks, 9 weeks throughout the year. It was during the summer. It was just me. And I didn't need to bring my entire life with me. When I turned around and bought a fifth wheel, my new purchase back in 2011, I went for a 38-foot fifth wheel, which, you can carry everything, including the kitchen sink in here, literally with you. I've got books with me. I've got my library with me. I've got everything you could think of. And there are some consequences to that too that I'll get into in a second.
Okay.
Now, with regards to your question specifically, when you have a larger motorhome, a Class A or a larger Class C, you're going to want to have a tow vehicle. That means you own 2 motorized vehicles, and you're going to be paying insurance on 2 motorized vehicles. In contrast, and your second vehicle, by its nature, is typically going to be a smaller, lightweight car. That for me is a factor, because in my lifestyle, where I'm skiing all winter and when I'm traveling during the autumn primarily, I like being up in the mountains, and I like getting out on mountain roads. and I can take my Ford F-250 3/4 ton diesel pickup truck onto any road that you can think of, no matter how old or how decrepit the road. There was a case where I took a drive from a little town called Meeteetse, Wyoming, to Kerwin, Wyoming, which is a ghost town that was abandoned on the order of 100 years ago. And I think that's the last time the road was improved. And as I drove out there, it was 40 miles. It took 2 hours to give you an idea of exactly the conditions that I was driving in. I had to cross 2 streams with upwards of 18 inches of water, running water through the stream. And had I been the motorhome guy,
yeah, you're not taking your dinghy there.
exactly.
You're gonna be the dinghy.
Whereas with my big old pickup truck, I was able to motor through that and, get up into the area. And, God has a sense of humor. I did this on September 25th, and it started snowing heavily in the afternoon when I was up in Kerwin, which again is 40 miles from the nearest civilization. And trust me, Meeteetse isn't much. It's a town of about 100 people. And of course, my Verizon didn't work. When it started snowing, I had to immediately start thinking about how am I going to drive down a muddy, snowy path that was barely the width of my truck. But again, if I had a small import or a small vehicle from Ford or Chrysler or whoever, it would have been a lot more difficult. Now, if you go the route of a towable, what I encourage people to think about when I'm consulting with people on RVs is you have to really think about, first of all, do I have enough vehicle to pull this thing? You've got to make sure that the vehicle you have can pull the weight you're going to pull. The second thing you have to understand is that a fifth wheel is always going to pull better than a travel trailer. Travel trailer people often call bumper pull because it's hooking up to the ball on the back of your vehicle. That by its nature is not as stable a pull as putting a hitch in the bed of your pickup truck and being able to pull that thing where the hitch is sitting on top of your rear axle. So much more stable pull. Either way, you are paying for a towable, which is a much lower insurance rate, and you're paying for a motorized vehicle. Now, one point on insurance: if you are a part-timer, then make sure that you speak with a RV insurer that is going to give you a decent rate. I happen to actually recommend a couple, and through RVacrossamerica.net, people can always reach out to me, and I will be glad to recommend to you an insurer that I know specializes in RVs and will give you a fair rate. I mean, paying $300 or $400 for a year on a towable is not unreasonable. However, if you're a full-timer, don't lie about it.
Yeah, right.
You will pay a premium, but you'll pay a real premium if you do end up having an accident and they find out that you're a full-timer and you didn't tell them.
You're dishonest about it. Yeah, for sure.
Either way, you're paying less than what you're paying for 2 motorized vehicles.
Gotcha. So on the motorhome front, though, you had mentioned having a motorhome, and definitely if you're traveling long distance, the motorhome, having the extra vehicle to tow behind, they call it a dinghy. They also call it a toad, right? Yeah, that's different words that people use. So people have seen the motorhomes going down the road with sometimes I've seen like trucks behind them, but most of the time they're a smaller vehicle, like you mentioned. And those are people typically that are traveling more distance, right? I mean, there's people that buy motorhomes, Class C's, some smaller stuff. A lot of times that they'll stay more local, or is a motorhome really just for somebody that's going to drive, 1,000 miles a trip?
I would say not necessarily. A motorhome could be great for somebody who lives, let's say, in the megalopolis between Washington, D.C. and Boston, and wants to take weekend trips to the Poconos or up into the Catskills or out into West Virginia if you're closer to D.C. You don't necessarily have to travel big distance, but what you have to think about is when you get out there, how are you going to get around once you're out there? Do you want to drive in a motorhome? Small enough, that's fine. But if it gets bigger and bigger, then you've got to consider, well, exactly what is it I want to do? The other thing you have to think about, and for me this was a factor because I travel on my own, how are you going to hook it up? And I learned real early on that the idea of trying to get a Class A motorhome or even a Class C connected to a car, you really kind of need a second person. And even with a travel trailer, you really kind of need a second person to help you with that. Whereas with a fifth wheel, it really is a one-man job or a one-woman job.
So you mentioned the travel trailer hooking it up. Those watching the show, that if you've gone RVing at all, especially with a travel trailer, and you've tried to back that in or get into a campsite, people literally get their chairs out and will position themselves to watch people pulling in, because it's like it's not a circus, but it's an event to watch. I mean, my wife and I, right? We have these. We try really hard to say, okay, we're not going to argue this time when we go get there and have to pull the travel trailer in, because we do currently have a travel trailer. We started back in 2007 with an expandable, which I wouldn't suggest those to anyone. And we did it because we thought it was the right thing to do, and that's a whole other story by itself. But recently, so we got a 30-foot, 32-foot Coachman a couple of years ago, bunkhouse. We have I had 3 teenage daughters. One's married now, but I'm out of the house. But they enjoy camping, so pretty much have gone local. We were towing that with we were towing it with a Dodge Durango, and it was more than it really should have been carrying. But just got a new truck in December, so looking forward to maybe upgrading that fifth wheel here in a couple of years. But cool. So as you've been looking for, we kind of talked about motorhomes a little bit, as you've been looking for that new fifth wheel for yourself, right? I understand that your lifestyle is a little bit different than probably most people watching the show, but the benefit that brings to everybody being a full-timer is that you have a lot of experience to offer people, whether you're not going to misguide them, whether they're going to take it for a weekend, take it for, short-term, 3 months at a time, or they're going to live in it full-time. So in your process of trying to find which fifth wheel was the right one for you, what are some of the more generic type questions that you've asked yourself, and you've had other people as an RV consultant, you've had to walk them through that process of trying to choose which one's right for me?
I think there are 2 or 3 things you really need to think about. Everybody talks about floor plans as being the king of things to think about. And to me, there's some importance there, but there's 2 more fundamental issues to me that I would consider. Okay. Having lived in this thing for 5 years, and I'm in a rig that's actually fairly well built, there's a lot of room for improvement in the RV industry. I'll be generous and I'll be gentle and say that.
You're right. You're right.
And, being in the consulting business, I'm always talking with people about different rigs, different fifth wheels, different travel trailers, different motorhomes. And one of the common issues that people run into is, why do these things need so many repairs, or why do they break so readily? Especially to a full-timer, because you're really using it in a way it was never intended to be used.
Right, all the time.
The hot water heater, the furnace, things like that were just never intended. And I'm actually using it in conditions that, ready for this, drop down to as low as minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm really using it in conditions that were not intended.
That's a little cold, man.
Yeah. So what I've found is that you first have to look at these things from a standpoint of quality.
Okay.
Quality of construction. I could get into naming specific names. I don't know if you want me to go there, but when you look at a fifth wheel or a travel trailer or a motorhome, I look at not the eye candy, because there's a lot of really poorly built rigs out there that have tremendous amounts of eye candy. They're using the right countertops. They're using the big refrigerator. They're using the big.
Great. Yeah, they look great.
Yeah, they look great. But all you have to do is visit some Facebook forums and find people that were driving the XYZ fifth wheel and their water tanks fell out. Mm-hmm. And it happens to be common with one manufacturer in particular. That happens, and it's because they're using substandard supports to hold the water tank, and then you wonder why it falls out.
Yeah, right.
I look for things like, what about the slide ski? That's the underside of the slide.
Okay.
In fact, what I would encourage people to do, I was shocked when I took a look at I won't name them, but they're the #1 selling fifth wheel out there. And I went to a dealer's lot and I saw a number of them that had been traded in that were 3, 4, 5 years old. And this was in a part of the country that got pretty cold in the winter. And almost every one of those fifth wheels had the material underneath the slide ski, it cracked. Now, the fact that it cracked means that the wood that your slide is actually composed of is exposed. And of course, it doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of water to get in there, destroy the underside of the slide, and you end up with a major repair as a result of it. That's what happens when a manufacturer uses substandard materials. You've got to look for that. I'm in the search process right now, and I've just about finished my search process.
Okay.
I found a company that, as an example, uses shock absorbers on their axles.
Oh, nice.
Now, for anybody who is going to go, another thing that I learned, let me go off on a slight tangent here.
It's okay. It's all right.
Another thing I learned as I lived in my 38-foot behemoth is that if your goal is to drive down 95 or drive out 80 or drive down I-5 and pull off the exit ramp and find an RV quote unquote campground, which is within 3/4 of a mile of the exit ramp, you could be in a 43 or a 44-foot motorhome or trailer and you're just fine. But if you want to get out outside of West Yellowstone into a National Forest Service campground, or if you want to go to certain Bureau of Land Management campgrounds near Helena, Montana, you better not be over 35 feet or you're just not going to get in. You may not even like the road that gets you there. So that's where I was mentioning before that you really have to think about your lifestyle. Sure, that 42-foot behemoth is going to be luxury to live in. It's going to be nicer than 5 Midtown Manhattan apartments. However, where are you going to take it, or where are you going to want to take it? And if that's the case, you really have to think about downsizing to the 30, 35-foot range. My next rig is likely to be from a company that makes it as 33 feet 9 inches. And 4.5 feet that I'm shrinking is going to make all the difference in the world. Give you another example. I had a conversation with a company just yesterday that does factory direct fifth wheels. That's their claim to fame, that they make the creme de la creme. They make, well, not creme de la creme, because you can spend 2-3 times more than what this company was going to charge for their product. Their product, I was looking at a 34-foot rig, and it was going to be about roughly $80,000.
Okay.
And for that, they give you in the walls 1 layer of fiberglass and 1 layer of the R foil, the aluminum foil that is a R14 insulation. Contrast that to a few companies out there that are using 2-inch thick solid foam insulation. Now, I mentioned before that I camp in conditions down to -35 Fahrenheit, and you're going to say, well, Alan, that's for you because you're staying up at the North Pole for the winter. And that may be to a degree true, but I maintain, and when I go into RVs on a dealer's lot in the middle of summer where it's 95 degrees out, there's also a difference between the one with the 1 layer of fiberglass and R foil and the one with 2-inch thick foam. The one that's poorly built is going to be baking inside. It's going to be 100 degrees, and the other one's going to be 10 or 15 degrees cooler inside.
Right.
So it's not just a winter thing, but it's also a summer thing, that a better insulated unit is going to save you on air conditioning costs. And when you stay in an RV park, some of them, if you're a long-term resident, are going to make you pay your own electric.
Sure.
That's typical on the month-to-month relationship, especially in the winter, but sometimes in the summer, again, depending on the park and depending where you are.
Right.
That's something that could make a difference of $50 or $60 a month if your rig is poorly insulated versus well insulated. And you can't, while I'm on this, go with the R factors. The R factors are the big joke in the RV industry. Our rig has an R47 roof. Really, please. You have to look at the actual construction and understand what they're doing. And even that doesn't necessarily match up on an A/B comparison,
Mhm.
when I went to one factory and I looked at how they were building their chassis, and I saw that when they put in 2 layers of fiberglass and then they put a seal over it, they don't pull the seal tight,
Mm.
because all you have to do is realize, if you know anything about the Pink Panther fiberglass, if you compress it, it loses its insulation value. So they leave it nice and fluffy, and they do that intentionally because that helps with the insulation.
Sure. So, you mentioned a fifth wheel, upwards of 80,000. There's lots of people listening that are like, what in the world? My budget's 35,000 or less. And I think anybody that's been in the industry for a while, we get a lot of reviews on RVingPlanet about products. And one of the things I think going into, and you have a lot of this content on your website as well, that when you buy an RV, even if you choose the right lifestyle, you're only going to go short term, you're still going to have issues with it. It's a house on wheels. There's no way to have no issues at all, especially in that lower price point. And I think it's important for people to realize, even when you're buying in that lower price point, let's say you're only going to use it a few weekends out of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a trade-off. You're paying less money. The manufacturers, to vetting them to some degree, they're trying to make money themselves, but they're trying to get products out there that people want, people will buy. And unfortunately, to some degree, people really love all the amenities. They're great to have, they're cool to have. And for people using it every other weekend or a few weekends out of the year, my feeling is I can kind of be okay with that. But they have to go into it with their eyes wide open, I think, is what I'm really trying to say at the end of the day, right? I mean, everybody's going to make a choice. You may not buy that $80,000 rig. You may buy a $30,000 rig. But your eyes need to be wide open going into it. And no matter which direction you choose.
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
When somebody comes to me and they're in the $20,000 to $40,000 price range, what immediately comes to my mind is you can buy a really nice looking, really poorly built fifth wheel or travel trailer in that price range that's brand new, that as soon as you drive it off the dealer's lot is going to drop in value like a rock, especially for the first 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
After 2 to 3 years, the value tends to level off until they're about 10 years old. Or you can be the guy that buys that 2 or 3 year old fifth wheel or travel trailer, or for that matter, motorhome,
Mm-hmm.
that has already been through the first depreciation cycle. It was bought by Johnny Jones or Sally Smith that had all these grandiose plans of doing all these wonderful things, and then life happened.
I didn't get to.
And for whatever reason, it's a trailer or a motorhome or a fifth wheel that has sat and hasn't been used. It's been used maybe 5 times over the 2 or 3 year life since it was brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny Jones and Sally Smith also got the honor of going through the initial quality control issues with whatever manufacturer they bought from and getting those things fixed.
Right.
So my advice would be to buy a slightly used, relatively new travel trailer fifth wheel, save the money, spend that 20, 30, 40 grand on something that's used. Now there isn't going to be a manufacturer's warranty, but the manufacturer's warranty are only a year anyway. And one of the things that I highly recommend, mostly, is an extended service contract. Now, I don't want to sound like an advertisement, but I do offer those to people and they can reach out to me and get a quote. The reality of an extended service contract is I could go down a list, especially again, since I'm full timing, on the things inside my trailer that have failed over this 5-year period. Now, some of them would not have failed because of if I was only using it a couple of times a year, but others would have. In fact, the 2 big items that I've put through my extended service contract, which more than paid for what I paid for it. Right now, my refrigerator, because it was in the cold this winter, is in need of a cooling unit, which is going to run about $1,000. And that's going to be covered by the extended service contract.
Nice.
They cover components, by the way. People need to understand, no, it's not going to cover your roof if it leaks. That's a maintenance issue. The roof is something that if you talk to any manufacturer, they're going to want you on that roof and doing something to maintain it twice a year, whether you or not. The other service that I needed on an extended service was landing gear, which also very well have failed, whether they were being used a lot or not.
Landing gear, you're talking about your automated jacks?
Yeah, the jacks in the front.
Okay.
Exactly, those things.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that happens is the motors that these manufacturers put in are underpowered. That's endemic throughout the industry. People wonder why their slide motors quit. Well, it requires I'll just pull numbers out of a hat, but an 8 horsepower motor, and they put in a 4 horsepower motor. Why? They're saving money. It's just the way the industry works. What do you end up doing? You end up having to pay for the upgrade unless you've got the extended service contract, and things like that are covered.
Gotcha. So there are probably, we're going to need to finish up for today, but there's probably a million things that we could continue talking about here. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Hopefully you'll have another chance. Hopefully you'll be willing to come on again and share some more things with us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, there are topics like camping in the winter or camping in sub-freezing weather. The majority of this country gets below freezing during the winter, and there's no reason that you can't go out and enjoy the outdoors. Camping as a family, there are thoughts that I have there.
Nice.
The idea of where you can go to camp, and how those choices impact, again, what it is you're driving around or pulling around. Those are all factors that you got to consider. And spend time, go to a show, go to some big dealers, and when you go inside a rig, sit in it for 15, 20 minutes. I encourage you not to do it on a Saturday afternoon when the salesman is trying to, meet as many people as possible. But if you go there on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning and you occupy 3 hours of his time, I don't think you should feel bad about that. Or just, ask him for a key to be able to get into the rigs, and you can go in and wander around. Just realize also, though, that if you go in more than 3, 4, or 5, your head might explode.
Yeah.
They all start looking the same, and you got to really think through that.
Well, that's a whole. I tell you, I was been to Hershey RV show, Hershey, Pennsylvania, a few times, and I tell you, if you want, you can't just do it in one day. But if you want an induction and what's out there for RVs, that's a great place to go. Have to have a show, but maybe we'll actually go there this year. Who knows? And do a live show from there, but.
Not a bad idea.
Just as we finish up, Alan, just kind of tell us currently what you're doing real quick, and your website, and how people can get a hold of you.
Well, the website is RVacrossamerica.net, and people can reach me there. There's a contact me button right there, and I'm pretty good about getting back to people. I've got a YouTube channel. If you search RV Across America, I'm sure you'll probably find that too. But go to the main RVacrossamerica.net. That'll get you there. And you can always reach out to me. There's a little subscribe button if you want to hear newsletters from me. I don't blast people with spam. I don't send out a lot of newsletters. Probably ought to send out more. As far as what I'm doing, today was my last day on the mountain. It is late March as you and I are having this conversation. The weather has warmed up. There's been a fair amount of rain here in the central Idaho mountains. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to hook up my fifth wheel to the truck. And if everything is behaving itself, I'll be heading on down the road, moving towards Boise, and then probably spending the summer in Casper. That's where I do my consulting. And, in between, I'll take some time and enjoy life. And then my big opportunity for kind of bumming around comes in the autumn, September, October, and November.
Okay, fantastic. Well, again, thank you. I know that RVingPlanet.com is one of our sponsors on our show today. And if you go there, check out their site. And we'll have some links down below too. They do provide quite a few guides to all of our listeners out there on whether you're buying a new RV, used RV. Some of them are free, some of them have a nominal charge. But I really encourage you guys to take a look at those. Just as we've talked about in previous shows as well, and Alan mentioned today, there are so many different things to think about when buying your next RV. We want you to make sure that you get the right one for you, and you get a good deal and able to use it. Some people overspend and then you don't have enough money to go camping. So we want you to be able to actually use the RV and enjoy the lifestyle. So, well, I think that wraps it up for this show. And until next time, I hope everybody enjoys the RVing life.
Take care, Kevin.